Hello, this is Bill Hahn. Welcome to the IBM BPM Tutorial Demo Series Bootcamp Edition. This series is available as one continuous demonstration or 5 modular demonstrations along with this presentation in downloadable format at ibmbpmdemos.com along with other resources and as streaming videos on YouTube on the BPM in Action channel. In this series, we'll be taking a look at IBM BPM in Action, how it's rapid, agile, and iterative across the end-user experience of Process Portal. Then we'll take a stop on the Process Optimizer to see how we can identify hotspots of process optimization and go through continuous process improvement. We'll take a two-part tour of IBM BPM's Process Designer and how that allows for dynamic design, development, collaboration, and continuous playbacks as we build out process applications. And then finally, we'll use the cloud-based environment of blueworkslive.com to do process discovery, modeling, and collaboration in the cloud. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to take a look at the end-user experience of Process Portal. We'll take a look at how individuals, managers, executives, and other end users can experience BPM in action using the Process Portal. So let's go ahead and get started. In IBM BPM's Process Portal, work is organized in a getting things done fashion. Work that is due now, later this week, tomorrow, work that's at risk of going overdue, and work that's already overdue. So we can see our inbox of tasks or activities awaiting our attention. When we work with those activities, we can easily get a preview of the information related to, in this case, orders and account opening activities and other work. For items that require streamlined approval, we can approve quickly without even opening up any additional user interfaces. If we'd like to search for certain items, we can get quick access to all the things in our inbox. We can see right now we have 38 items or activities awaiting our attention. If we search for just orders, we can see that narrows it from 38 down to 30. If we search for iPhone orders, we can see that only 5 of our work items or activities are related to iPhone orders. And if we drill down into these, we can see that they're destined for different customers: Target stores, Costco, Best Buy, and Walmart. And if we search for iPhone orders that are destined for Target, we can see that zeroes it down to 1 work item or activity awaiting our attention. We can do a number of things with activities. We can view the details. We can see who's worked on them thus far. We can see the picture of OF Analyst, Vendor 1 and Vendor 2. We can see the activities that were done, as well as the one at the top of the list that's awaiting my attention, manager approval. We can see a picture, a visual process diagram with people's pictures overlaid on top of them, as well as information about how many activities they've completed and the average time it takes them to complete them. We can see vendor 1 and 2, and we can see the activity highlighted that's awaiting my attention, so I can see not only what's happened before it got to me, but what I'm holding up down the line, as well as the people that have worked on this kind of an activity if I need to reach out to them for help. So the system automatically tracks who does what across the process. Now let's take a look at what might happen when a couple of people need to collaborate on work being done. You can see in these 2 web browsers on my desktop, which would normally be on 2 different computers and perhaps 2 different parts of the world, you can see Beth on the left and Bill on the right. Now Beth is going to kick off a new order, and she quickly finds herself in pretty deep and needs some help. So since the system has tracked who does a lot of work with this part of the process, she easily finds that Bill's available to collaborate with. So she can create a new invitation requesting Bill's help, and when Bill gets that invitation and clicks on it, it takes him to wherever she is at. And now you can see that when Beth clicks on different fields in the form, and changes data, Bill can see exactly what's going on with those red highlights. Now when Beth gets to a certain part in the process, or this form, where she'd like to give Bill the ability to drive, she can give him control. She lets him take over control. So now Bill's driving, so when Bill clicks on different fields on the left, Beth can see where Bill is clicking. So now Bill can correct whatever needs correcting and then provide her some guidance on what to do next. So he'll go ahead and fill out the rest of the form, and Beth can effortlessly follow along. And when he clicks next, Beth's browser follows along. And in this fashion, anything that we build in IBM BPM automatically has these collaborative features with zero additional development effort. So let's go ahead and progress this order. Let's log on as vendor 1. Vendor 1 can easily find that iPad order. Drill down into it, see just-in-time, real-time reports, essentially indicating the faster he responds, the more likely they are to win the business. Now vendor 2 will log on. Vendor 2 progresses the order, responds with an appropriate quote, a little bit lower price. And now when Bill logs in and takes a look at that order, he can look at the details and make a recommendation on which vendor should be used to fulfill the order. Now Bill can take a look at the process diagram. Now we can see, sure enough, Beth is the one that kicked off the order back when she was collaborating with Bill and getting his advice on how to fill out the order. These are the two vendors that worked on the order that look suspiciously like my children. And here I am in the process, highlighted clearly for me where I am and who has worked on this part of the process or this activity before in case I need to reach out for help. I can look at the details of this activity, this process, what's been done so far, and I can see that Beth kicked it off and now it's awaiting my attention to select and recommend the vendor quote. There are also dashboards in the process portal that make it easy for us to get enhanced visibility on exactly what's going on. So I could take a look at, for instance, my team's performance and see the percentage of work that's on track in blue, that's at risk of going overdue in yellow or orange, and what's already overdue in red. I can see what's going to go overdue in the future, and if I click on one of the pieces of the pie, like the at-risk piece of the pie, I can see just that portion of the work stream. I can see the work that's loading down my team and how that work is spread out across my team to perhaps make a better decision about who to assign this work to if I want to rebalance things. So I can either proactively think about what's going to happen in the future as well as efficiently react to what's at risk of going overdue, changing the priority or reassigning it to different people on the team. I can also take a look at the overall process performance with trending information across days, weeks, or months. And I can see the highest volume and velocity activities in my process. So for instance, that manager approval activity has a lot of work going on that's overdue, at risk of going overdue, as well as on track. I can build ad hoc reports. So up to this point, all the dashboards we saw work consistently in a general purpose fashion with every process that you use. Any process you build benefits from them. We can also build process specific reports or ad hoc reports. These are examples of those, showing me my service level agreements and the percentage of work that is on track in green here, and where I'm missing my service level agreements in red. I can see in this lower right quadrant a report that shows me wait times, and I can see manager approval is taking a lot of time as compared to other activities. These ad hoc reports are very easy to build into application screens, as we saw before, as well as after the application is deployed by end users. So here's an example of that. I can access the automatically tracked data. I can make this list of data longer or shorter just by clicking some checkboxes in my process application, as you'll see in a future tutorial demo on using the process designer. So without having to write any code, without any programming, I can easily make this list of business data longer or shorter so that business users can easily select the data they're interested in this case, customer and total quantity of orders. Let's get a pie chart that shows me the volume of orders by customer. Maybe a multicolored bar chart, make it easier to see that Target is my highest volume orders in terms of customers. And then at this point we can take a look at perhaps diving down into the details of why manager approval has more wait time than other activities. So look forward to the tutorial demo on Process Optimizer to dive deeper on that topic. In this tutorial demo, we're going to take a look at the Optimize portion of the lifecycle of BPM. We'll use the Process Optimizer to analyze the process. So let's go ahead and get started. In the Process Optimizer, which is the third perspective in the Process Designer, we can look at historical or simulated scenarios. If we look at historical versus historical, we can compare different time periods or multiple scenarios. So from a time period standpoint, it might be interesting to look at this month versus last month to see if our process has improved or degraded. So we'll take a look at the heat map that this produces. It's tapping into the real data, historical as well as in-flight data, that's automatically collected or tracked in the process. So what this heat map shows us is that the create order activity this month, the A scenario, versus last month, the B scenario, has degraded 9%. The vendor responses have degraded by 27%. In other words, they're taking longer now. The analyst activity, where an analyst looks at the vendor quotes and recommends which vendor or vendors should be chosen to fulfill the business, is actually happening more quickly now. There's less wait time, 63% less wait time. B scenario last month was taking on average 1 day and 17 hours of wait time, and A this month is 15 hours, a lot quicker. Manager approval is 14% more wait time, so that's gotten worse. Let's take a look at another heat map. Let's take a look at all historical data for all orders in flight as well as completed. We can see various hotspots in the process. So manager approval is taking on average 17 hours, 38 minutes and some change. The analyst activity is taking over a day of wait time. Now, let's put some business context on that. Let's look at the percent of instances outside range. In other words, let's ask the business how long this should take. Maybe it's supposed to take a day. We'll take that simple answer and we'll plug it into a property sheet of the process diagram, and then IBM BPM automatically calculates for us, the punchline, the percentage of time that it's taking longer than the business would like it to take. Manager approval is taking longer than the business would like it to take 50% of the time. So with zero development effort, that's calculated for us automatically. Let's take a look at another heat map, account-based heat map, waiting activities and those in flight. We can see manager escalation, there's 8 of those waiting to be looked at. There's 133 orders that have been created thus far. There are 10 orders that are waiting for vendors to bid on them. There's 1 that's currently been claimed and being worked on by a vendor. And there are 165 bids that have been completed. Analysts have 9 orders waiting their attention, and 232 have been completed. And managers have the largest number of waiting activities, waiting for them to work on. Let's take a look at the path analysis. In the path analysis, what we can see is of all the orders in flight and completed, 62% have been approved. Now when we click on these lines, these links, we can see or tap into the automatically harvested data. The metrics that are being collected for us are auto-tracked. So the process data for all the approved orders is shown below. If we click on the rejected link, when a manager rejects an order and sends it back for rework to the analyst, we can see that 33% of the time orders are rejected or sent back to analysts for rework. We can see all the details of those rejected orders down below. So now if we refine this to only all completed orders and press the calculate button, we can see is, and it makes sense, that eventually the orders are approved. Of only the completed orders, 100% of those are eventually approved. Now 51% of the time they're sent back for rework before they get approved. So now if we click on the rework line and then press the spreadsheet icon, we easily export the data, and now through normal spreadsheet jockeying techniques, members of our business team can look at this data and perhaps try to spot patterns. What if we could spot patterns where under certain circumstances it's likely or highly probable that a manager is going to reject an order anyway? Why let it sit in their inbox and pay them a lot of money to evaluate it in a high-touch fashion if we know that they're going to reject it anyway? Well, we could easily spot those cases with this rich data that's being collected and provided to us. We can also ask IBM BPM to spot those patterns for us. So, in other words, if we take a look at the guidance that's allowed on the right side, it provides some insights or some food for thought. Have we thought about escalating the activity? How do other times compare? Is rework making it high? Are people efficient? Who's involved in this activity called manager approval? What else are they working on? Should I reprioritize the tasks or decrease the execution time of this somehow? Should I add resources to the manager approval activity? We can also launch this bypass wizard, which will actually look for the patterns for us. So let me go ahead and get back into streamline mode here and look at all the data and then launch that guided optimization wizard. So what we can do here is identify the data in the process that we want to base this analysis off of, and that's the status variable. That's where we store the approved or rejected decision of the manager. That's the process data variable where accepted or rejected, approved or rejected is stored. So we can see lots of circumstances where it's approved and different combinations of order parameters where it's rejected. And based upon these observations, IBM BPM will provide some process rule suggestions for us. And it can take these rule suggestions and actually incorporate it in a risk-free experimentation of how the process might be approved. So when I press the finish button, it actually added an auto bypass gateway and a set of business rules. So we can see when the manager needs to evaluate this in a high-touch fashion, they will. Or if we can satisfy certain parameters, we'll bypass the manager and auto-approve it or auto-reject it. And the way that that's decided is through this generated rule table. We can see when it's a certain combination of customer, vendor, product description, material description, price, total quantity. For each row of the table, it's going to either be automatically rejected or automatically approved. So the range of possibilities that we can achieve with the optimizer is quite vast, and we've really just scratched the surface. Indeed, there are many other scenarios that you can run through using the process optimizer. And there's summary data collected for us as well, relative to key performance indicators like cost, labor, resource, activity analysis for executed, completed, average, max, distribution, and this all behaves the same whether we're using historical data or simulated data. In this tutorial demonstration, we'll be taking a look at the design segment of the full life cycle of BPM. We'll be using the process designer to get acclimated to how you navigate around and use the process designer to do dynamic design work. So let's go ahead and get started. In the process designer, we have a palette of BPMN, business process modeling notation shapes, on the right. Among those are gateways, activities, swim lanes, and others. we can use those to draw the picture of the process, and so much more. So let's put a few shapes on here and connect them up to get an idea for how we do that. Once we have those connected up, we'll take a look at what's underneath some of these shapes and how this picture of the process is actually a process application. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this runs, because indeed you can run it at any time, no matter how much or how little has been implemented. When we press that Run button, it switches from the designer perspective to the inspector perspective, which is where we can see instances of our process running, or in this case, orders running through our order fulfillment process. And here we have the create order activity highlighted in the diagram. We can go ahead and claim or run that activity, and when we do, we can see the screens that are implemented for that create order activity. So we have a number of fields, several screens in the screen flow, some live reports that give us information that helps us get our job done. We can select the vendors we want to submit the quote to. And then when we get on the last screen, we can do some interesting dynamic things here. Let's drill down into this create order activity and take a look at the screens that have been designed and actually change them on the fly. Let's move this delivery forecast to the top left and the order details from the top left to the top right. And we can go ahead and save that change and see how it works in the running process. Let's go ahead and refresh that page. We can see that it's moved. Delivery forecast used to be in the top right, and now it's moved to the top left. So we've changed it on the fly. Let's go ahead and make another dynamic change that involves taking care of some of the data in the screens as a part of the payload of the process. So I'm going to move this comment field to the bottom right corner. And let's go ahead and transition the screen so that it gets stored in the process. We can see that it's stored in the payload of the process because even though this UI control is in a completely different location of the page, it's picking up that data from the payload of the process. Let's go ahead and get back to the screen whose layout we actually did change. And now let's go ahead and move it to the bottom right corner, save that, and try out that screen, and we can see we've actually changed that on the fly. We've moved it from the middle left to the bottom right. So let's go ahead and continue this process. Display the diagram, submit this, refresh the process diagram. We can see we've progressed to the Get Vendors stage in the process. It's nicely highlighted for us. It's been farmed out to 4 different vendors because we checked those 4 lines in the vendor table to whom we want to submit the quotes or request for quote. Then we can continue processing. We can see here the screens that the vendors see so they can get an idea of the fact that if they respond more quickly, they're more likely to win the business. So let's do a few other things. We can see that this picture of the process is a lot more than just a diagram. It's actually a diagram with implementation details about how this process application will run. In the create order activity, not only is there a screen, the one we were changing, but we can see that there are services that are called as well. So that, for instance, before we get to the select vendor screen, these yellow boxes are the screens, we're going to go get a list of available vendors. That's how we got those 4 vendors in that vendor table list. Then when we drill down, we can see there are multiple coaches or screens, and we can easily work with each one of them, like we were doing with the confirm screen. If we go back to the process diagram and drill down into the Get Vendor Responses activity, we can see it has several screens and a couple gray box services as well. There's that screen that we saw when we were claiming an activity for the vendor. There are other types of activities in a process or process diagram. For instance, there are business rules. Business rules can take several forms. They can be natural language or decision tables. So for instance, in this decision table we see a combination of customer, vendor, material description or product name, price, and total quantity. Different combinations of values for those are going to render different decisions. So if it's a combination in that row I've highlighted, it'll automatically reject manager approval. Or in that row, it'll automatically approve. So depending upon the combination of process, data, values, we're going to render a different decision in this decision table. We can also work with natural language. In other words, what happens is the process data or process variables are automatically synthesized into a business rule language. So customer, date, email, issue date, planner comments, priority. You can see they're not just process variable names anymore or data names and types. They're actually part of a natural language you can use to formulate a business rule statement. And this can be varietal, it can be logical, and it can contain the data in a way that we issue events or set new values and render some sort of a decision. So the fact that we can take the data of a process and automatically use it in the context of a business rule decision table or natural language business rule statement can be very flexible. There's other logic in this business process, like in this decision gateway. We can see in the property sheet that in the implementation section we're accessing any of the, we can actually access any of the data that's flowing through this process in this data structure tree, and by selecting any of it, in this case by selecting the status, we can decide in which cases we'll take which branch of the tree. So we can see here when the status, in other words when a manager presses the approve or the reject button, in this case the approve, it's going to take the yes branch of the tree. So we build in logic both visually and programmatically into the process diagram so that it's not just a diagram but actually a process application. This box or activity in the process isn't actually just an activity, it's a subprocess, a reusable linked subprocess. And in this case it does some straight through processing and calls out to a human exception when necessary to store the order once completed in a back-end system. This particular service is actually an encapsulated service. It does a number of things: database interactions, interaction with the data warehouse, a web service call before it goes ahead and updates a back-end system of record. And we're able to include that or leverage it in our process application even though it was built by someone else. It was built by someone else in our team and is stored in an enterprise SOA services reusable module called toolkits in IBM BPM. So we can see in the process library on the left there's a number of different artifacts. We can get to all the artifacts very quickly just by typing. By typing part of the name, it'll zero in on what we might be looking for. We can visit the categories, processes and subprocesses, user interfaces and human services, all sorts of Web 2.0 capabilities, implementation, integration components and services, decision business rules, the data that we define for our process, performance reports and metrics, files, as well as the reusable modules called toolkits. So we see this Enterprise SOA Services reusable toolkit, which came from a different part of our organization, has a list of, and think of this as anything in the IT landscape can be surfaced here. So we can reuse existing new or old integrations and drag them and drop them into our process visually, wire them in programmatically, and then call them seamlessly from our process application. So we can see this service, if we drill down into it, is that service that happened to be used in another part of our process application. When we use this, we can choose between different versions, so we have seamless version control that allows us to coordinate the integration and development between teams. So if we choose version 2, we can see that was a different version that someone developed for us. If we choose version 3, we can see that that's yet another version. So as we roll out changes and in a rapid, agile, iterative fashion change this process application over time, the seamless snapshot version control makes that much easier and able to coordinate amongst different teams. We can use that same snapshot version control with the simple icon of a camera up top to version our process. So as we've made some changes to our process and drew some process elements in the upper right corner, I'm going to go ahead and version this version 4.1 and indicate its backend integrations, and what we'll see is that gets added down here to the revision history. So before we started this demonstration, I snapshotted it to a version 4.0. So you can see if I select that now we no longer have the elements that we drew during this demonstration in the upper right hand corner. If I select version 4.1, you can see there it is. So if I go back in time to version 4 and go ahead and revert, once I deselect this yellow bar indicating we're looking at an immutable snapshot and look at the current version of the application in flight, we can see it no longer has those shapes in the upper right hand corner. If I select version 4.1 and revert it back to the tip of our development stream, now I can see that I have everything that we've developed since we started this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to actually two process designers. So let me double click this and switch to two process designers. And the top half is me, Bill Hahn. You can see my name in the title bar up here in the upper left. And I can see other members of my team that are connected to this process model. So I can see Ray is online and he's working with a variety of things. Ray, who normally wouldn't be on my screen here, I'm just showing two instances of the process designer. Ray would probably be in another building in our organization. Ray can see that I'm online and see that I'm pretty busy. So now, because we're connected to the same process model, we have a shared model architecture. When I start drawing shapes in this, we can see that Ray sees that someone is editing, Bill is editing this, and he's instantaneously, dynamically locked in read-only mode so that he can't accidentally change it while I'm editing it. And as soon as I save my work, then he sees the changes. Let's see that again. When Ray makes a connection here and saves it, Bill can see the changes. When Bill adds a shape to the diagram and connects it up and saves those changes, Ray can see it. So we can dynamically collaborate, real-time collaboration between two or more members of the team seamlessly because we're sharing the same process model. And we can actually work on multiple elements and multiple levels of the process application simultaneously. We don't lock one another out. So parallel development or simultaneous development with real-time collaboration is very feasible. So that's a good example of how we're actually sharing the same process model. Now, if I go ahead and log on to the process portal and take a look at this from an end user point of view, one of the things we notice is that because we're sharing the same process model, even end users can see the new elements that we drew in here, at least in development and test mode. We might lock that down and roll it out in a methodical fashion with versions so that it doesn't affect a production system on the fly. But in development mode, this can be very, very useful. So as we take a look at the shared model in the center of our full life cycle for rapid, agile, and iterative development, it truly is very dynamic. In this tutorial demo, we're going to take a look at process playbacks using Process Designer to build some process elements from scratch. So let's go ahead and get started. In Process Designer, I'm going to take a new activity from the BPM end palette and add it to our diagram. This new manager activity is what we're going to be building out. So let's go ahead and connect it into the process. And first off, since we claim that the process is always runnable, no matter how little or how much you've implemented, let's actually run it before we've built anything out about the new manager activity, other than just drop in the box on the diagram. So let's press this run button in the upper right hand corner, which we like to call the playback button, because the spirit is that we're going to play this back to business and IT, the business and IT stakeholders, early and often, as we're building this out, so that we're always in sync in a rapid, agile, and iterative fashion. So let's go ahead and step through this. We can see that it's highlighted in the diagram. We're running at the first new manager activity that we've just added to the process diagram. Let's go ahead and claim that activity and see what it looks like. Well, it turns out that we are provided a default user interface for activities that aren't yet implemented. If we look at the details of that, we can see the instance ID. So we can see in the list in the top left the unique instance ID of this process instance. This order is 505, so that makes sense. And the task ID we also have for each activity in the process as it's executed, a unique task ID. That shows up here as well. So far I think we're tracking along. When we progress through this activity and refresh the process diagram, we can see highlighted in the diagram we've gone from the manager activity to the create order activity. So we have focus in the process diagram indicating where we're at. So let's go ahead and claim and run that activity and see the user interface that's not unlike some of the UI elements that we're going to build out for a new manager activity. For create order, which is already built out, let's go ahead and populate some order information. Let's create an iPhone 5 case order for the West Sales Division, high priority, a particular due date, a quantity of 100, and some planner comments. Please expedite this order in support of our launch campaign. And that's going to come from Beth, our senior analyst. Let's add a document attachment, which is one of the many things we do mainstream to BPM, and then proceed to the next screen in this screen flow. So we have a live report, we have the analyst comments there, we can choose the vendors that we're going to farm this out for quotes to, and then in the summary screen we see all the information that we've provided in this set of screens that is helping to coach us through participating in the process. Now before I press the submit key, I'm going to actually change the process on the fly. Let me change this connection and connect it back to this new manager activity so we can loop around and experiment with iteratively playing back the evolution of our new manager activity. So let's go ahead and use the activity wizard. In the activity wizard we can choose or get a jump start on implementing different activity types. So they can be user activities, it can be system tasks like calling a service or a back-end system. They can be business rule decision tasks. They can be scripts like JavaScript, a sub-process or linked reusable sub-process. In this case we're going to take the choice of a user task. When we finish, we see that it has implemented a starter user task for us with one coach screen. We can name these coach screens anything we want, so I'll call it new manager activity screen 1. And in here, it's already created a default user interface for us. So it turns out that as we create new user interfaces, we can reuse them over time. I'll show you that in just a minute. So let me go ahead and continue using this activity. I'll go back to the create order screen and actually submit it to progress the process, and since we've wrapped around that connection back to new manager, we can see this growing list of activities which is now sitting on our new manager activity that we just generated a screen for, and let's see if it's working. So we'll go ahead and claim and run that activity, and sure enough the data that's going through the payload of the process, it's being managed by the process engine, is flowed into this screen. So it looks like we have the beginnings of building out this activity. Now we're actually going to build some screens from scratch to give you a feeling for what it's like to build from scratch. You notice that screens that I previously built I can surface and advertise on my visual palette of views. We call these views called coach views. So we can build custom views, reusable, componentized, nested views, and then make them easily available on a custom palette. So here are some other views that I've previously built to give you an idea of variety, and we could use those if we want, so to get really good accelerated reuse out of our development efforts. We can also drag and drop process data. So we have the data structure of our process data in the visual palette, and when we drag and drop out, for instance, order, if there's a view that's already been created for that data type, it will go ahead and choose the view, and we can cycle through different versions of this view if there are multiple user interface designs for a particular part of our process data structure. Now we can also see down in the property sheet that that view is bound to the process data, meaning it will display the process data, and if we change data in that user interface set of controls, it'll update the process data. And we see the complete data structure that we can bind the UI controls to, and the ones that match the data types are highlighted or bolded. Okay, so let's move ahead. Let's go ahead and create some things from scratch. Let's create a new section. We'll call this the order details section, and for clarity's sake I'm going to drag out one that I've already created and show you how we create that from scratch. So we'll use that as kind of a model, if you will. Let me drag and drop a 3-column layout here, and then go to my process data, and in an a la carte fashion visually drag and drop out the different data elements: order number, material number, material description or product description, the customer field, total quantity, data element, the issue date. Let's go grab the sales division and also the priority, and then go find the quote deadline. So there we go. So we've got this built from scratch screen, and now early and often we want to play this back either for ourselves or for our business and IT stakeholders or all the above using the playback button. Either the component playback button we see here when we're building out individual components of the process, or the process playback button that we'll use in just a few moments. So we can see this is what the screen looks like as we're building it out. If we change the screen by dragging and dropping UI elements around and press the playback button again, it runs the screen immediately. So we can quickly and easily iterate through our process development, including screen layouts. So now let's do a bit more. There's a part of the process data called vendor responses that's actually an array or list of data. And so IBM BPM's process designer knows what to do with that. It says, well, the most appropriate UI element for that is a table. So now you go ahead and lay out the elements of it that you like. I'll rename some things, maybe narrow it down to just the elements I care about: company name, contact, email, and username. And I'll go ahead and frame it so it's visually appealing and change some of the names here. I'll call this analyst recommended vendors, and either hide or show different titles. Alright, that looks rather clean. Let's add a bit more to this. Planner comments is a field that we use to communicate and collaborate across different participants in the process. Let me select a different UI element, not just a text field. Let's make it a text area. So we can just type part of the name, and as we do, it will zero in on the various process artifacts like UI elements. So I choose the text area dojo widget for that. Let's frame it in a way that's visually appealing. Drag and drop the planner comments text area inside of that section, and away we go. So let's play it early and often. We can see it's shaping up here. Now we have 3 sections. Let's go ahead and use an accordion tab layout to organize this in a more compact fashion. Let me drag and drop some of these sections into that tab layout, making them different pages or tabs in this tab layout. And let me duplicate this accordion tab layout because I want to show you a couple of different versions of this. One version that is an accordion layout, so we'll call that the accordion, and one that is a tab layout, so we'll call this tabs, and configure that to be tabs. And let's go ahead and play that and see what it looks like. So the accordion one on the top behaves like an accordion, as you would expect, and the tab layout behaves as tabs. Let's get a little bit fancier. Let's go ahead and lay some more elements out. I want to be able to see that planner comment separately without having to go drill down into the tab. And then we're going to do something subtle here. We're going to drag the tabs into the accordion. So it's actually going to be a nested tab section. And we can see in this design mode, we can actually navigate through it in a somewhat of a WYSIWYG fashion. Let's play this back. We can see the accordion layout, the nested tabs inside of one of the accordion elements, and there are the tabs. So we can efficiently organize our screen real estate. Let's do one more thing here. Let's copy that and give you another example of how we might lay things out. Let me grab an expanding section, a Dojo title pane, and let me drag this into the title pane, which I'm calling an expanding section. And let's go ahead and play that back and see how that looks. We'll call this the title of the title pane, Order Details Expanding Section. Let's go ahead and use that playback button. So now we can see up at the top we have an expanding section that we can expand or contract. That's an efficient use of screen real estate. We have our accordion layout, the nested tab views, and the planner comments down below. Now, one of the things we can do, since we see this expanding section begins in an open state, we can configure that for even more efficient screen real estate to be initially closed. There's all sorts of things we can do with the Dojo-based coach views. So you can see it begins in a closed state now. So let's move ahead. Now let's go over to the inspector view. That's where we can work with the running instances of our process. And let's actually tap into this running instance of our process, the order in flight, and see when we do so that it actually flows the payload of the process, all that data, right into this screen we've been building. So now we can get some really dynamic, rapid, agile, iterative playback sessions where we can work with the end users, the business or IT stakeholders that really understand how the process needs to work and view it in the high fidelity of example business data. So let's go ahead into the screen layout and let's start using it in the context of the end user environment to see how the screen real estate is further managed. So let's go look at this. Is the actual instance of the process, the order that I was just working with inside of the process designer. We can access that same instance of the process, that same order that's in flight from the process portal because we're sharing the process model. So let's go ahead and move things around further, refine, and do dynamic playbacks. We just move the planner comments in the designer from the bottom location up to the top of the screen. Let's see if it really worked by revisiting this in-flight order. Sure enough, we can change it on the fly. So now let's go back and do some more layout. Let's use a 2-column layout and see if we can further refine the screen real estate. Let's put them side by side and see how that looks in the end user environment of the process portal, where we have various eye candy on the right hand side. We have our body area in the middle. Let's go ahead and refresh this from our work list, and it picks up the changes on the fly. We've got our accordion section on the left side with the nested tab views. We've got the planner comments on the right side. So we can see this is really a dynamic, rapid, agile, iterative approach to playing back and building out what it is we need to do for the process. So we'll continue changing this. We can see with the live data how things look. Let's go ahead and move the accordion up to the top and visit it again, and we can see now the accordion or the expanding section is up at the top. Let's go ahead and see some other things that we get out of the box, like for instance this collaborative editing capability. In other words, with zero additional development effort, these new views that I just built, this new human activity called new manager activity I just built out, with no additional development effort, is automatically enabled for collaborative editing. So if Beth or Elizabeth on the left hand side asks for some help when she's using this activity and asks to collaborate with Bill, and Bill, perhaps in some other city, state, or country, gets that collaboration request, he can simply accept it, and now when Beth clicks on fields, Bill can see with those red highlights on the right, wherever he is in the world, what Beth is doing. And as Beth changes data, he can see that Beth changed that field, and she can get pretty jazzed up about this. You know, this is great that we can collaborate real time, and you can see it's highlighted where she's at, and it says Elizabeth Hahn has changed this field. And then if she wants to, she can let Bill drive and let him take over control. And now, when Bill types in this field, Beth sees that Bill's working on that area, and when he makes a change to it, yes, it is great that we can collaborate real time. From Bill, the management consultant, Beth can see those changes real time. So we pick this up out of the box with zero additional development effort for anything we build in Process Designer. Lots of capabilities to accelerate your design and development experience and to get the solution out the door more quickly. So before we finish, let's go ahead and complete this dynamic design and development scenario. Let's continue on the create order, and before I hit the submit button on the final screen, let's do one last final change. Let's dynamically rearrange the connections in this process diagram, save it, and submit it. And what should happen is that we've progressed further on down in the process. So talk about a truly dynamic experience. Imagine using this with business and IT process stakeholders to really engage in the experience of building out the right solution with the right kind of dynamics. So now when the vendor goes ahead and claims this activity and works on it, if we go ahead and look at the one final point in the process portal, with all that work and those changes that we've made to the process, including that new visual element, that new activity, you can see that whatever changes we make to the process diagram are also automatically pushed out to the end user community so they can see exactly where they are in the process, as well as who's worked on the process along the way. So hopefully this has been a good tour for you of how Process Designer can be used to do dynamic playbacks. Demo tour is in BlueWorks Live, an online cloud-based environment that we use to model business processes from a web browser. So in here we can document the process with a high-level, business-friendly process discovery map. We can add details about the process, the participants, the roles, the business owners, experts, systems, time and cost, the inputs and outputs into and out of these activities, and things like the risk and value-added nature. We can capture the tribal knowledge of the team, the problems and challenges, and document the severity and frequency. We can document the details of the process and attach documents that we have, and comment and dialogue about the completeness of our process model, of our process documentation. We can do that with a discovery map, and because of the way we do that in the discovery map, we automatically generate the swim lanes that are needed to flow this business process. And for activities that are incomplete or not fully documented, we can either fill in the details like the vendor role, or we can drag and drop these activities between swim lanes and have that documentation filled out for us. We can also use the process diagram view to see the lower levels of detail in the form of subprocesses, and fully document the process using a business process modeling notation palette to draw out more details in the process. Either at the discovery map layer or at the process diagram layer, we can organize our process into lower levels of detail like subprocesses, and so these are just lenses or views into that single process model that let us easily document the process. There's a documentation view that gives us a document serial view of everything we've put into the details of the process, and you can see that it's a summary view. We can take all the information that the team puts into this process model and export it as generated Word documents, a nice summary document format of all of the details of our process, the problems, the document attachments, and share that with the broader business community. We can also generate PowerPoint documents of our most current business process model and use those for business meetings to socialize and build consensus. In addition to modeling and documenting the process, we can also analyze those details. So with these visual overlays, we can get a quick view of things like the systems, the cycle time. We can overlay that information on top of the discovery map or process diagram. For instance, we can see risk and value add. This set of non-value added activities might be a candidate for cost containment. We can see a heat map of the problems throughout our process, a very telling view that gives us a quick inventory of where we're challenged in this process. We can see all the file attachments, quick and easy access to the things that the team is attached to the process for collective documentation. When two or more people are collaborating on the process, you can see in the bottom half of the screen, Ray is perusing the templates library to get a quick start on doing some modeling, and Bill on the top half, and perhaps some other state or country anywhere on the internet, can see that Ray's online and invite him to join him on this particular process model. So now, as Ray works with this process, adding an activity and changing some documentation, Bill can see it happen live. As Bill makes changes to the process and moves that documentation around, Ray can see that process model change in near real time. So this near real-time collaborative environment makes it easy for the team of 2 or more people to easily collaborate real-time on the process. So now if we want to take that process model from a model of documentation and analysis into a model for execution where we can actually run this process, we can simply, from within our process designer environment, now a desktop tool, we can connect to BlueWorks Live and pull in all that process documentation and then carry it forward into an executable process. So you can see all the process and sub-processes came in. We can open it up and then get more detailed about how we want to model this for execution. You can see in this process model that not only the main process came in, but all the sub-process levels of detail. So all of our work on the BlueWorks Live environment is seamlessly carried forward into our process designer where we model for execution. This series is available as one continuous demonstration or 5 modular demonstrations along with this presentation in downloadable format at ibmbpmdemos.com along with other resources, and as streaming videos on YouTube on the BPM in Action channel.